Sui Ishida, the author of Tokyo Ghoul, what can only be described as one of the past decade's most iconic anime and manga, has finally put out the debut chapter of his new manga under Shounen Jump, Choujin X. Calling this manga highly anticipated is an understatement, and the first chapter already sets up a promising foundation for the symbolism and philosophical questions into human nature that Ishida is known for from Tokyo Ghoul. And so today I'm looking at the first and only chapter out so far, and my favorite or the most important moments I see from it. How excited I am for Choujin X, another manga from Sui Ishida, and where I see this dark series going in the future with Shounen Jump. Let's dive right in. Right after you subscribe, of course. Don't be part of that 96%. The support would be huge for the growing channel. Let's roll my intro. Now, I'm not going to give a huge summary of the chapter and what happens because, well, most people watching this will probably have read it, and if you haven't, I don't want to ruin that experience for you. Because it does have a formidable length of 82 pages as well, so there's a lot to unpack, and each detail would just be kinda tedious. So instead, I'm going to focus on 4 main things. The meaning of a Choujin, both in the word's actual definition and how it'll pan out in the manga, the roly-poly analogy, one of the biggest points of symbolism in this chapter, the dynamic between the 2 main protagonists, and the future of dark manga in Shounen Jump, and how they're beginning to, honestly, take over. And so first, what is a Choujin? Now, in Japanese, Choujin refers to a superhuman, Superman to be more specific, but I assume within a broader context in this manga, it won't be limited to just one gender. And the title actually does remind me of Choujin X's older brother in Shounen Jump, Kaiju number 8 in its title, and its concept. Something very interesting to note, however, is the irony of these. In that Kaiju number 8, Kaiju meaning monster in Japanese, is a much more light, slightly comedic set manga compared to the already very dark Choujin X, where the idea of a superhuman or Superman being kind of a brighter hero is contradicted. Though that stereotype is beginning to be broken down anyways, especially with new hits like Invincible, which turned the idea of what a heroic icon is on its head, and have turned what are expected to be superhero typical cartoons into a darker, more mature and realistic take on the genre. Regardless though, it'll probably be a situation of one of, if not both of our main characters taking on a heroic Choujin role, something that is hinted at in the chapter itself. And especially considering Azuma's very stand-up and stoic personality, already I could definitely see this happening. But just considering Sui Ishida's style, and if we can take any semblance of what will happen from Tokyo Ghoul, it won't be as peachy as that. They get away with doing whatever they want. It's something of an affliction. The series will definitely develop very serious tones further on what it means to be a Choujin and the temptation of power itself, of being able to do anything you want. And I'll come back to this later when I talk about Azume and Tokyo specifically. But before that, I want to move on to the second topic, which is the conversation about, yes, roly-polies. The conversation between Azuma and Tokyo begins with them discussing a terrorist attack from a Choujin, noted specifically to be another Choujin by Azuma as well. At this point in society in the manga, we can already tell that Choujin are bad. They get away with what they want, and from the conversation between these two, it seems that there's never really been one to come to light who is actually using their power for good. And thus, the conversation about roly-polies begins. Azuma tells Tokyo the reason roly-polies gather under rocks. They're active in dry places. They keep moving, and they stop only when it's damp. So once they reach a rock, they nest and gather beneath it simply because it's no longer dry. And so Azuma raises the question, do you think roly-polies like damp places? Though it's assumed that they would because they always stop there, it might simply because it's no longer dry, because their instinct forces them to stop in a damp place rather than them particularly enjoying it. And then he wonders if Choujin are in fact like roly-polies. What he's questioning is, essentially in a very roundabout way, whether Choujins like to commit terrorist attacks, to act with evil intentions, aka whether they would like to stop in those dark, damp places, or whether it's just their nature kicking in, if it's just something they biologically have to do or do even without wanting to. It raises the question of whether there are no good Choujin because no one wants to be good, or because Choujin physically can't be. This will likely be an important self-questioning both of our main characters will have to go through later in the series, considering they are both, probably we can't tell with Azuma yet, Choujin now. Dealing with similar themes to Tokyo Ghoul, the conflict between human morals and the natural desires and actions of being a Choujin will be a huge driving force in this series, I'm sure. And now the two main protagonists, Tokyo, the main character, and Azuma, who is a bit more of a side character or rival figure, and their relationship will definitely be important in the future of this manga. Their dynamic does remind me somewhat of Hide and Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul. Not a lot, but just in the way that Tokyo, similar to Kaneki, is much more introverted and soft-spoken, while Azuma reminds me of Hide's more outgoing and expressive attitude. You can definitely see many of the same motifs and stylistic decisions from Tokyo Ghoul here, what the author likes to play on, and so I'm excited to see how Sui Ishida manages to switch it all up and keep it fresh. Tokyo almost just always follows what Azuma does. He calls him over if there's trouble, goes somewhere with him if he asks, even buys a book about insects after their conversation about roly-polies. At the end of the chapter, in his effort to do anything he can to help Azuma and following his leave, he takes the injection with him to become a Choujin. It'll be very interesting to see how Tokyo grows out of his shell, becomes more independent when separate from Azuma, and I'm sure having the power of being a Choujin will help along those means, to make him stronger, more confident in himself. And I think that this very wholesome goal right now that they have of beating the bad guys, of preserving justice, will probably get twisted as we continue, as they both cope with what it means to be a Choujin, and maybe deal with the consequences of being one that were hinted at in the roly-poly conversation. The darker and uncontrollable side of being a Choujin that they won't be able to suppress. I'm excited to see how it'll affect their close and almost teacher-student kind of relationship as it is. Whether one will get drunk with power, whether Tokyo will take the upper hand, there's a lot of potential ways it could go in my eyes. And the last point is just a broader discussion about the maturity we're seeing in Shounen Jump nowadays. With Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, and the recently finished Hell's Paradise, we're witnessing a huge shift of tastes in Shounen Jump to favor darker and more mature manga. It's something that I've really loved to see grow. And so I definitely think Choujin X, if done right, considering the dark foundation that has already been set in recent years by the aforementioned manga, plus having a huge name and reputation from Sui Ishida pushing it along, it can definitely go far and further usher in this wave. It's definitely got a lot of potential, and I know this might feel rushed to say considering it really only has been a single chapter, but I don't know, I feel good about it. Ignoring the anime adaptation, Ishida did very well with the Tokyo Ghoul manga, and so I'm sure there won't be a problem in Choujin X. What did you guys think of the chapter? I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing where it'll go, definitely. Leave a comment down below. As always, this has been the Anime Culture Corner. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future in-depth show, manga, and character analyses.